Chapter 53. Gohan stood resolute, feeling the ki of the creatures slip away as they retreated into whatever outside space they were using to hide in. Sure, this seems like an unwinnable situation, but... He turned to Zarbon. They have two weaknesses. Two? Sure. The first is that there's a sort of pattern to their attacks. Like they're not fully autonomous. But it's pretty complex, so I'm going to need you to use deep sight to get a fix on it. In the middle of a battle? Zarbon shook his head. There's no way. Just try. You're not going to be the one fighting them. Try and focus, I'll stay up as long as I can. And the second weakness. His eyes narrowed as one of the creatures appeared in front of him, arm raised for a downward slash. He moved in a blur, catching its hand and twisting, breaking the wrist. Screeching, it retreated back into insubstantiality. When they do appear, they're not all that fast. Compared to me anyway. Don't know about you guys. Nope, they were pretty quick from here, Videl muttered to a grunt of assent from Frieza. Gohan ducked left but wasn't quite fast enough to avoid taking a glancing blow. He swung at thin air as it withdrew, then immediately turned, sensing another behind him. His elbow caught it right in its front row of eyes before it could attack, caving in its face and sending it reeling. It fell backwards, disappearing as it went. Interesting. Gohan thought. It seems they even vanish involuntarily. That does support my theory. Zarbon. Could use some support now. An attack struck him from behind and he turned the fall into a somersault, regaining his balance and catching an incoming kick in both hands. He heaved the creature's leg up, spinning it head over heels and kicking it away. All right. Zarbon's voice was brittle and scratchy. His eyes were glazed and he shook slightly. Can't do it for long, fast movement, too much information, overload. Okay. Gohan breathed slowly. Try and analyze their pattern. There's definitely a structure. He edged left and right, trying to keep his eyes on all his friends at once, waiting for the next attack. Without warning, it began again. Zarbon stared silently, absorbing the sensory input. Dozens of speakers was one thing, but complex movement on this level was taxing his abilities to their limit. Focus, steady. He's right, there's a pattern, I think I see it, he blinked. Gohan. It's like a computer program. It's just a simple method of choosing their attack formation from a few set patterns, based on what you're doing, behind you, 3 seconds. Sure enough, another alien appeared behind Gohan in approximately 3 seconds, only to be met with his already swinging fist. Left, 2, to your right, 2 seconds. Zarbon frowned as Gohan, acting on his advice, beat back the next 3 attackers. Hold on, they're switching pattern. It appears there's only about 10 in total. Gohan swung around in a full circle, watching for his enemies. Just tell me where the next. Above you. Got it. A heavy swing took the alien down and this time it stayed there. Gohan settled to the ground, rubbing his bruised knuckles. These things have pretty tough skin. He trailed off as the whole group phased into view simultaneously, forming a line a few feet away. He could see that nearly all of them were quite badly injured. They don't look so good, we really did a number on them, huh? You said it. Zarbon muttered. Are they surrendering or what? I don't think so. Videl was standing up now, gazing into the distance. We first sensed these guys as a key signal, sort of jumping towards us, right? Well, she pointed at a mountain range a few miles away. I'm sensing the same thing again, over that way. Only more this time. How many more? Gohan asked. 20? 50? He paused, sensing it himself. Huh. No, a lot more than that. Wow, that is a lot of them. Guys! Get ready. Silence fell. They edged closer together, all assuming combat stances. They arrived. Hundreds of the creatures, thousands, maybe more. They crowded in a circle around the four explorers, filling the landscape, stretching all the way back to the horizon. Not one was bothering to hide or disappear unless there were simply even more they couldn't see. This? Frieza turned in a full circle, gaping at the army assembled around them. This could be a lot better. Well, don't just stand there. Gohan shouted, powering up to Super Saiyan. Come and get me. Either leave us in peace or prepare for battle. Can you take this many? Videl asked, shifting uncomfortably. That would be a negative. I'm hoping they don't realize that though. He whispered back. If they all attack at once, we're dead. Silence fell, stretching on for moment after agonizing moment. Then one of the creatures began to move forwards, making a beeline straight for Gohan. Jiralethithonaler, a lyrical voice called. The attacking creature froze in place. A rustling noise came from the distance. The ranks of the horde were parting like waves before some mythical prophet. A humanoid figure rapidly approached, growing larger in their vision as they approached. Their energy was fairly small, but there was something about them, a foreboding feeling, a sense of hidden danger. Not quite key power, just a vaguely menacing aura. She stood taller than any of them and was basically similar to a human, quite unlike the monstrous creatures that surrounded her. Despite her height, she was thin and waif-like, but moved with a confidence that seemed at odds with this frail appearance. She was dressed like some ancient priestess, adorned with finery, and her face carried a faintly bored expression. As they would later find out, this was the general appearance of her race, and even when joyous, angered or depressed, their expressions never ventured from bored into anything stronger than vaguely interested. What did she say? Videl murmured. It means stand down, the woman replied, suddenly in front of them, having briefly vanished. We developed a language specifically for giving orders to the drones. It avoids unnecessary confusion. I see, Gohan noted. She can disappear too. Drones? Do you control them? Why did they attack us? She ignored his questions, regarding him with inscrutable eyes. Perhaps you are sufficient, Golden Warrior. A golden me? Gohan blinked. I'm sufficient? For what? I will explain in Citadel. Come. She turned away, gesturing to them. I will remember you are flat thinkers. I will try to remain visible to you. Flat thinkers? Shrugging, Gohan powered down and followed. We're going. Zarbon arched an eyebrow skeptically. Well, if you want to stand around here and test if ignorance is bliss, be my guest, but I don't put your chances with these drones too high once she's gone. Gohan replied. Zarbon gulped. You know what, actually this citadel sounds great. Half a galaxy away. The darkened chamber stirred for the first time in decades. Machines hummed to life, mechanisms untouched by the years whirring into motion. Report, Galactic News Observation #1523205+++. Keyword identified, Scion +++. Computation, Cold Dynasty currently non-existent +++. Query, Super Scion +++. In the darkness, a pair of eyes slowly opened. Something red gleamed in the shadows. Scions. A husky voice breathed. It is time. Part of the strangeness of Citadel was the way once you entered one part of it, all memories of the rest became hazy and vague. You could never quite picture more than one place at a time. The one thing that did pervade all attempts at recall was a sense of sanctuary, that you were in some untouchable place outside of normal existence. Currently they sat in a small, sparsely decorated room in simple wooden chairs. A pair of the monstrous drones guarded the door. Tensha, for that was her name, stood facing them, leaning on some surface they could not quite see. It was to do with the same mysterious ability that enabled both drones and speakers, as she identified herself, to vanish and to move invisibly and intangibly. She explained it thus. You are able to travel from your world to ours. Therefore I assume your scientists have at least considered the possibility of more dimensions than the 3 commonly perceived, correct? 4. Counting time anyway. She paused. What we do is simply to move through a 5th dimension, a direction not normally comprehensible to beings of this universe, let alone accessible. Hence when I call you flat thinkers, it is only in the way you would refer to a 2-dimensional being, say a living drawing, flat. It has less dimensions than you. You can move in a way it cannot. The object that supports my weight at this moment is too far in the 5th direction for you to see. I am resting on its edge. I see. Gohan said, rubbing his temples. But, flat thinkers. Zarbon nodded. Indeed. Note emphasis on thought. This implies that it's not a genetic ability, Gohan finished. You've learned to do this. Tensha appeared genuinely taken aback by their quick deduction. I see that you have quite the analytical mind. Both of you. It is true that our ability, shifting, we call it, is not genetic. However, our brains are well adapted for higher thought functions such as picturing 5 dimensions in ways comprehensible to beings normally confined to our 4. I highly doubt other races are capable of duplicating such a feat. Well, that's nice, Vidal said wearily. Real nice. What I'd like to know is why your guards shoot first and ask questions later. Forgive us, the Alfheim native pleaded. It is just only one other group of off-worlders has ever landed on our planet before. We sent a diplomatic envoy to meet them. We did not expect them to respond with such hostility, and many speakers were lost before sufficient drones could be summoned to overpower them. Hence the transmission. Frieza nodded. Ghosts, so these drones. What are they? We created them. They are not sentient exactly, their intelligence is around that of a plant. They are biological machines designed to carry out physical tasks our own physiology would not permit us to perform easily. Combat is only one of these. There was a long pause and she felt the need to fill the silence. I suppose I should explain why I invited you to our capital. General assent. Very well. Curiosity mainly. I was going to let them kill you, hoping to avoid another slaughter of our people, but then you only threatened to fight if you were not left in peace. I was hopeful you would not be like the others. There are good and bad examples of every race, Zarbon said diplomatically. And Frieza cocked his head to one side. Could the other 7 people listening in please stand where I can see them? Don't try this spying crap with us. How did you? I've been watching your eye movements. You keep glancing at points around the room for confirmation. Then you continue a line of conversation based on some cue they give you. Tensha sighed. Brothers, sisters, the time for secrecy, it seems, is at an end. 7 more of her kin duly materialized. Please understand, we merely. The last visitors started a massacre. Gohan waved a hand, smiling. You're well within your rights to be cautious. Don't worry about it. Now, I guess you probably want to know why we're here. Correct, an older male speaker replied. Named Derry, as they later learned, he spoke abruptly and always seemed rushed, whatever he was doing. Right now, he pushed a pair of elaborately rimmed glasses up his nose, hopping from one foot to the other as he waited for a reply. Simply put, we're on an exploration mission, Gohan said. Our planet has had limited contact with the wider galaxy, so we set out with multiple goals: determine the galactic political situation, fight injustice, I suppose, though that was kind of an accident, and bring back the wisdom of the stars, if that isn't too poetic a way of putting it. Not at all. He trailed off, mentally composing his reply, sniffed, and continued. Well, I suppose it's the least we can do to offer our hospitality. I'm sure there's much we can learn from each other. That isn't your choice to make, Tensha pointed out. The council? Derry snorted derisively. Bah! By the time the council have held their committees, filed their paperwork and debated their minutiae, our visitors will have been and gone. Our love of bureaucracy has made the council in short-term matters completely ineffectual. Now if you don't mind, I'm rather pressed for time. Good day. He strode off, vanishing into the fifth dimension before he reached the doorway. Tensha almost smiled. Don't mind him. He has many virtues, but patience is not one of them. He is right, though. If the council wanted you to leave, it would take several months to make the decision official. But I'll put in a good word for you anyway. Hey. Frieza whispered to Gohan. Can I say we come in peace, or do you want to? Gohan rolled his eyes. They already know we come in peace, idiot, you don't need to. How about take me to your leader? Didn't I tell you to stop watching so much TV? Peaceful days followed. Citadel was like a waking dream. The architecture sloped in and out of perception, all twisting corridors and stairways that defied logic. Speakers and the occasional drone faded into view and then disappeared. White, blue and gold formed the dominant color scheme, giving an ethereal appearance to the whole place. Both the natives and the travelers learned much. For their part, Gohan and company told of the wider galaxy, something Alfheim's inhabitants had never known much of, and of their own personal history, the trials and battles they'd faced in recent years. They became minor celebrities. In fact, once tales of their initial battle against the advance guard of drones spread, becoming exaggerated as such things are, the nickname Golden Warrior was especially popular. In return, the speakers answered all questions about their species, their society and their planet as best they could. Gohan noted several subtle parallels with the state of affairs there with those on Nemea and, indeed, on Earth. These went into a new chapter in his ongoing book, on the tendency of any society, on any world, to fall into certain patterns. Of particular interest was the shifting ability. Gohan was determined to understand it, at least intellectually, if he physically lacked the ability to observe the fifth dimension naturally. Currently he was staring intently at a hologram projected between himself and Tensha, who sat opposite him in a long, open-air room. The hologram projected what appeared to be a cube with another, smaller cube inside it. Consider the tesseract, she instructed. It is to the cube as the cube is to the square. Gohan nodded. So what I'm seeing isn't actually the whole shape, it's a 3D cross-section. Correct. When I use the part of my brain that lets us see this higher dimension, I can observe the entire shape. You've studied the equations. Yes, on a mathematical level at least, I'm starting to grasp the concept. It's just difficult to find a way to relate that to the visual, spatial areas of my brain. She paused, studying him. I must say you've taken to some rather advanced mathematics extremely quickly, and only a child. I've had one hell of a teacher, trust me. His mind briefly drifted off to countless hours of advanced studies, his mother's way of expressing her determination that he wouldn't follow his father's uneducated path. He blinked, refocusing on the tesseract. Okay, so how do I try and understand this thing? It isn't impossible. Nothing's impossible. His eyes narrowed. The world that I can see, these 3 dimensions, it's flat. Picture it as a flat plane, like a piece of paper. This thing is solid, it's more real than I am. Watch as I move it through the 5th dimension, Tensha said, before tapping a button on the projector. The image flickered, then began to move. The inner cube moved outwards, expanding and folding around the shrinking outer cube, until they completely changed places. You see? And now it moves through my paper universe, now I'm seeing a completely different part of it. Right. And come to think of it, she's part of this higher dimension too, right? I wonder if her ki, he focused on her energy, trying to let his ki sense do what his eyes could not.
Do it.
Line. Square. Cube. Tesseract. Move up. Greater depth. He gasped. What's this energy? Her eyes widened. Don't tell me you can sense my true self. Gohan nodded. It's like seeing the real world after living among cardboard cutouts for my whole life. Wow. That's impossible. Your brain just isn't wired to. He grinned. Well, see ya. This is pretty tiring actually. I'm going to go make sure Frieza doesn't eat you out of house and home, Kay. He stood up and wandered off, leaving Tensha in a daze. I don't believe it. He combined his factual knowledge and his warrior's instincts to detect something anyone would have said was literally beyond him. Just who and what is this child? 2 months later. Zarbon ducked away as Videl pressed the attack. He jumped over a low kick, striking back but slowing down so she could see him moving and block. You're still holding back, she accused. Of course, he said calmly. You're relatively new to truly advanced martial arts, whereas I've been a soldier of Frieza most of my life and more recently a spiritually trained fighter. It wouldn't be fair to go all out. Don't worry, if I lower my power level like this you still give me a good workout. She spun, trying an elbow strike but missing again. One day I will overtake you. All of you. Gohan too? His father? Come on, that doesn't count. She swung at him again and he raised an arm to defend, but without warning Gohan appeared between them, catching both hands. He didn't materialize completely from invisibility like the speakers and drones, and nor did he appear in a blur of motion like someone using instant transmission or simply moving very fast. It seemed more like he assembled dozens of tiny pieces blinking into existence, the gaps rapidly filling to form a solid image of the young warrior. They stood there for a second in stunned silence, then lowered their fists. Gohan. Videl shrugged. What was just what? My sentiments precisely. Zarbon arched an eyebrow. Gohan laughed out loud. It worked. Awesome. Well, technically it's not quite shifting like the natives here do it. I can't actually perceive the fifth dimension, but in effect it's the same thing. I guess I sort of opened up a passage through the dimension for a fraction of a second and jumped through. Like this. He disassembled, then reappeared on the other side of the room. No key signature to trace, see? Right. Zarbon nodded. Pretty cool. I'm guessing you don't have to lock on to an energy signal to use it, right? So it's better than instant transmission? Not exactly. It's true that I don't need to lock on like that, but I can only jump to somewhere I can see, so its range is kinda limited. He sat down, pulling a notepad from his back pocket. But it's not the most important thing I've learned here anyway. More of a party trick, really. The important thing is what I can conclude about sentient beings in general, having encountered not just wider galactic culture, but 2 isolated ones as well, here and on Earth. Yet the same social patterns emerge. It's fascinating. So how long are you planning to stay here? Not too much longer. I reckon we'll only need to visit 1 or 2 more planets, and only for a day or 2 each, just to confirm some stuff I noted on Nemea, if it's true of all, or at least most, worlds in the former empire. In terms of new techniques, I wouldn't have much hope for learning too many. I mean, shifting isn't nearly as useful as instant transmission. I think learning anything revolutionary is pretty rare, honestly. While many aliens have a pretty high power level, that's just genetics. If anything, Earth has some of the most spiritually aware martial artists in the universe, and some of the most diverse techniques. Videl smiled. No place like home, eh?